Hey everyone, it is Fitz with your Power Talk. After the first spring football press conference of the year, we just met with Chris Klieman up at the Veneer Football Complex, and a lot of topics to be covered. We got plenty of time here this month to cover spring topics. In fact, we had a number of guys at the press conference to speak with Coach Klieman and players. There were 4 players made available. But today on the Power Talk, I want to speak about the topic that Chris Klieman came first with, and that is the proposed 105-man roster limit for college football. And I say proposed because, according to Coach Klieman, it's not even in force yet. They expect it to be passed early next week. And if so, what will be with it? Will there be any relief in terms of practice squads or any of that? If not, a hard and fast number of 105 guys can be on your roster. You can scholarship them all or as few as you want. That's up to the school, but you can't have more than 105. Most coaches think that's too few. After all, you're going to have a number of freshmen that just aren't physically ready to compete. That's part of the college football game. You've got to get up to the right size and speed to protect yourself, basically. So maybe you take about 15 to 20 guys off of that roster limit. Now you're down to 85 guys that can compete, come in and help you. Maybe 90. And then you get injuries. You see, between starters on both sides of the ball and special teams and injuries, 105 actually cuts it pretty close. And it also steals opportunities from a lot of athletes that don't get to walk on, to be a part of that 120-man roster, even though they know they're not going to play. And they can eventually work their way into playing. K-State has a long history of that, as many other programs do. But now it's going to be pretty much just the players that are received on scholarship. K-State will always do walk-ons, but I think their access to scholarships will be much easier once they prove themselves. And if they don't prove themselves, well, roster cuts are now part of college football, and it's gross. Chris Klieman thinks it's gross. Most coaches think it's awful, and yet here we are. I sense that there's players and parents out there who don't see this coming, who think little Johnny is probably easily one of the 105. But just because you're on scholarship doesn't mean you're safe. You got to make sure you're earning that scholarship. And this expanded spring session with Coach Tremaine Carroll and the string staff has weeded out some guys who aren't fully invested probably. And these cuts will have to come before the start of the season. But that's not fair to players either. Are coaches really going to wait to game week of week 1 to get down to 105 and just leave guys out who have already enrolled in class expecting to be on your team and in your school? That doesn't seem wise, and I don't see Chris Klieman doing that. I think we'll see these roster cuts in the summer or sometime sooner. There may not even be an announcement, but the parents and the players are going to find out, and I think a lot of them are going to be shocked by what they hear. You see, it isn't just about are you a good player, but now you have to balance your numbers along the roster. You can only have so many offensive linemen, and I'm going to be blunt here. K-State's heavy on offensive linemen. If you're an offensive lineman that has been underachieving and on scholarship, don't just trust that your scholarship is still there at the end of spring practice. If you're not going to contribute, you're not going to take that 105 spot on this roster. You just can't do it. And along with that is if you don't offer an upside, a ceiling that the coaches understand and says, yeah, this kid isn't ready to play, but he's only a redshirt freshman. Let's give him some more time. We think he can grow into this. And I think some walk-ons will be kept over scholarship guys. This is going to get bloody across college football because there's going to be a domino effect too. You're going to see players get cut. And just like in the NFL, general managers and coaches are going to look around and say, we need that guy. We weren't good enough at that spot. Let's go get him. And then what happens? Someone else on your roster gets cut. Roster cuts are brutal. And I just don't think it's fair to really do this way. Chris Klieman wondered why they didn't step stool this in and make it 115, 110, and then 105. No, this group that has had all this weirdness about their college career, the transfer portal, NIL, the older guys coming off COVID that might have affected their high school years. It's been a sloppy period of college athletics. And now as the NCAA tries to reform, I sense that they're just doing things now that won't get them sued so that they look like they're doing things. And the 105 roster limit is one of those. Can K-State get down to 105? Yeah, of course they can. But I think there's going to be some players we expected to be on the roster, and they won't. We know this. If you were in this recruiting class, about 25 guys, maybe more, you're on the roster, no doubt. Boom, you're at 80. You got 80 spots for the returning players coming back, including all the walk-ons, including scholarship guys that might be injured. Now, this is another thing. If you're injured and it's long-term, I'm betting some coaches will cut you. Will just send you out, cast you away, and that's also ugly and gross. NCAA needs to slow down here. And I hope when they meet, when they vote, they take into consideration that this is too much, too quickly, and is unfairly impacting this generation of student athletes. I personally don't think there should be a roster limit. If you want to be at 105 or 115, go for it. If you want to offer 105 scholarships or 85, go for it. But I do think there needs to be an upper limit, because as you expand 105 scholarships available, I can see major programs saying, let's just take 20 more guys and park them and see if they develop. It's a mess. College athletics is a mess, but it is further made sloppy by not seeking the input of football coaches and those actually that are impacted by the rules changes. But that's the NCAA. It just does things its own way that just is always awkward and doesn't really serve the purpose they want. Creates more problems, and they've done it here with these roster limits. We'll see how it all shakes out for this Kansas State roster, and I'm sure there'll be some surprises. I think there already have been. You just didn't realize some of the transfers might have been roster limitations. Because if you're underachieving, whether you're a sophomore or a senior, your spot's up for sale, and someone is going to steal it right out from under you. Because now is the time to perform, whether it's in strength and conditioning, which is really important, or in these compressed practices K-State's having, 10 in total. And I'll get into the goals of that for Chris Klieman later this spring, but I think he's really focused right now on doing things that accomplish what he needs to accomplish with this team, be it roster limits or preparing to play in Dublin in late August.